I'll tell you how an ultrasound destroyed my marriage and saved my life. Married for many years, I thought I knew my husband until I learned he was having an affair, and then discovered his even darker secret that would give me the perfect revenge. But before I tell my story, please click the subscribe button. For you, it may be just a click, but for us, it's the fuel to continue researching and bringing you these incredible stories. My name is Elena Martinez, and at 42, I thought I knew exactly what my life looked like. 15 years of marriage to David, a successful engineering consultant who traveled between Denver and Seattle for major infrastructure projects. I worked as a senior ultrasound technician at Presbyterian/St. Mary Hospital, where I spent my days bringing joy to expecting families by showing them their unborn children for the first time. The irony wasn't lost on me. I helped create some of the most beautiful moments in other people's lives while my own remained painfully empty. David and I had tried everything. Fertility treatments, IVF, even considered surrogacy, but nothing worked. The doctors said there was no medical reason. Sometimes nature just has its own plans. By 40, we'd stopped trying, and I threw myself into my work, finding purpose in helping others experience the miracle I'd never have. Every ultrasound image I captured was a reminder of what I'd lost, yet somehow also what kept me going. I convinced myself that being the best at what I did was enough, that helping others was my calling. But deep down, I knew something was missing, and it wasn't just a baby. The cracks in our marriage started showing about 2 years ago, right after David's promotion to senior project manager. Suddenly, his trips to Seattle became more frequent. Twice a month turned into weekly visits that sometimes stretched into long weekends. He'd come home exhausted, claiming the Boeing contract was demanding, that the new airport expansion project required his constant oversight. I believed him because I wanted to, because after 15 years, you trust the person sleeping next to you. But trust, I've learned, is a luxury that naive people like me can't afford. The late-night phone calls became routine. He'd step outside to take them, always with the same excuse. Just work stuff, honey. You know how demanding Richardson can be. I'd nod and return to whatever medical journal I was reading, grateful that at least one of us was thriving professionally. David would kiss my forehead and mumble something about early flights, and I'd watch him pack his perfectly organized suitcase for another week away. The distance between us grew with each trip, but I attributed it to stress, to age, to the natural evolution of a long marriage. I was so focused on being the understanding wife that I missed all the signs screaming in my face. Our home in Cherry Hills Village had become a way station rather than a sanctuary. David would return from Seattle like a visitor in his own house, polite but detached, going through the motions of married life. He'd ask about my work, and I'd tell him about the families I'd helped, the twins we discovered, the healthy heartbeats that made parents cry with joy. He'd smile and nod, but his eyes were always somewhere else, checking his phone, scrolling through messages he thought I couldn't see. Sex became a scheduled event, mechanical and brief, like checking an item off a to-do list. I kept telling myself this was normal for couples our age. That passion naturally evolves into companionship. But companionship requires presence, and David was present in body only. Even when he was home, part of him remained in Seattle, and I was too proud to admit that I was losing him. I buried my suspicions in work schedules and convinced myself that things would improve once his project ended. The alternative, that my marriage was dying, was too painful to consider. March 15th changed everything, though I didn't know it at the time. David had left his phone charging in the kitchen while he showered, and it kept buzzing with notifications. Normally, I'd never even glance at his phone. Privacy was sacred in our marriage, or so I thought. But the constant buzzing was annoying, and I was trying to concentrate on scheduling my next week's appointments. I reached over to put it on silent mode when a message preview flashed across the screen. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby. I have something important to tell you. B. The heart emoji felt like a knife through my chest, but I stood there frozen, staring at those words until the screen went black. My hands are shaking as I set the phone down exactly where he'd left it, my medical training kicking in to keep me calm in crisis situations. But inside, my world was collapsing with the devastating precision of a controlled demolition. I heard the shower still running upstairs and realized I had maybe 3 minutes to process what I'd just seen. 3 minutes to decide if I was going to pretend I hadn't seen it or confront the man I'd loved for 15 years about his apparent affair. The next few hours passed in a surreal haze of forced normalcy. David came downstairs, kissed my cheek, grabbed his phone, and announced he'd be flying to Seattle the next morning for a critical meeting with the airport authority. I smiled and wished him a safe trip, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. That night, I lay awake next to him, studying his sleeping face in the dim light from our alarm clock, wondering how long he'd been lying to me, how many business trips were actually romantic getaways, how many late-night conference calls were intimate conversations with B? I thought about confronting him right then, shaking him awake and demanding the truth, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear of confirmation, or maybe it was the investigative instinct I developed after years of analyzing medical images. I needed more evidence before making a diagnosis. By morning, I'd made my decision. I was going to find out exactly who B was and how deep this betrayal went. David deserved the same thorough examination I'd give a suspicious ultrasound. After all, I'd spent years detecting things that weren't supposed to be there. The opportunity came sooner than expected. David left for the airport Tuesday morning with his usual perfunctory kiss and promised to call when he landed. I waited exactly 1 hour before accessing our shared cell phone account online, something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. The detailed call logs told a story that made my stomach turn. Dozens of calls to the same Seattle number, often lasting hours, dating back 8 months. Text message records showed constant communication with someone listed only as Brittany W. in his contacts. My professional mind cataloged the evidence while my heart broke piece by piece. 8 months of deception, 8 months of elaborate lies, 8 months of me being the fool who trusted blindly. I screenshot everything, saved the records to a secure folder, and began planning my next move. But the universe, it seemed, had plans of its own. That afternoon, while reviewing the next day's appointment schedule at the hospital, I saw a name that made my blood run cold. Brittany Walsh scheduled for a routine 24-week ultrasound on Thursday morning. The same bee who'd been stealing my husband was coming to my workplace, to my domain. The hunter was about to meet the prey, though she had no idea. As I stared at that appointment card, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't just coincidence. This was opportunity wrapped in fate's twisted sense of humor. For months, I'd been living in David's carefully constructed lie, but now I had a chance to see the truth with my own eyes. Brittany Walsh had no idea that the woman whose marriage she was destroying would be the one operating the ultrasound machine, capturing images of what I assumed was my husband's child. The irony was almost poetic. The woman who'd spent years dreaming of seeing her own baby on an ultrasound screen would instead be looking at her husband's illegitimate child. I spent that evening researching everything I could find about Brittany Walsh, social media profiles, LinkedIn, anything that would give me insight into the woman who'd destroyed my life. What I found was a 28-year-old administrative assistant at David's consulting firm, blonde, ambitious, and apparently very comfortable posting intimate photos with married men. By Thursday morning, I'd be ready for our first meeting. Brittany Walsh wanted to see her baby. I wanted to see my enemy. We'd both get exactly what we were looking for. Wednesday morning arrived with the cruel indifference that only devastating news can bring. I woke up before my alarm, my body refusing to rest when my mind was racing with questions that had no easy answers. Standing in my bathroom mirror, applying the same makeup routine I'd followed for years, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. The Elena Martinez who'd gone to bed Monday night, believing in her marriage, was gone, replaced by someone harder, more calculating. I had to work a full shift at Presbyterian/St. Mary, scanning expectant mothers and pretending everything was normal while my world crumbled in slow motion. The professionalism I'd cultivated over 12 years in medical imaging would have to carry me through this day, because falling apart wasn't an option. Not yet. My colleagues knew me as unflappable, the senior tech who could handle any crisis with steady hands and a calm voice. If I could deliver devastating diagnoses to patients with compassion and clarity, I could certainly survive one day of pretending my marriage wasn't a lie. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby." Tomorrow was now today, and David was with her. The first ultrasound of my shift was a routine 20-week anatomy scan for the Johnsons, a couple in their early 30s glowing with excitement about their first child. As I spread the warm gel across Mrs. Johnson's belly and fired up the machine, I was transported back to 2015, when David and I had sat in this exact position in Dr. Chen's office downtown. We'd been trying for 3 years then, and this was our first successful pregnancy after 2 rounds of IVF. I remember how David's hand trembled as he held mine, watching the grainy black and white images appear on screen. "There's the heartbeat," Dr. Chen had said, and David's eyes filled with tears of joy I'd never seen before or since. We'd made it to 12 weeks before losing the baby, and David held me for hours afterward, promising we'd keep trying, that our family was worth fighting for. Now, watching Mr. Johnson kiss his wife's forehead as their healthy baby appeared on my screen, I wondered when David had stopped fighting for us and started fighting for someone else. The Johnsons' joy should have filled me with professional satisfaction, but instead it felt like salt in a wound that was still bleeding. By lunch break, I couldn't concentrate on anything except the growing pile of evidence in David's phone records. Sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, I scrolled through months of calls and messages, each timestamp telling the story of my marriage's slow death. The pattern was clear. Their communication ramped up dramatically after David's promotion in January, right around the time he started claiming his Seattle workload had tripled. Every business trip coincided with increased message frequency. Every late night at the office matched calls that lasted until midnight. I felt like a forensic investigator examining my own life, collecting evidence of crimes against my heart. The worst part wasn't the frequency of contact, it was the timing. David had been calling Brittany while I was undergoing my final fertility treatment last summer, texting her sweet nothings while holding my hand through yet another failed cycle. He'd been living a double life with surgical precision, compartmentalizing his deception so completely that I'd never suspected a thing. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Meeting's running late tonight. Don't wait up." The same lie he'd been telling for months, and I believed it every single time. That evening, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I became a social media stalker. Armed with coffee and determination, I dove deep into Brittany Walsh's digital life, studying her like a specimen under a microscope. Her Instagram was a carefully curated collection of motivational quotes, workout selfies, and professional headshots that screamed climbing the corporate ladder. She was undeniably beautiful in that generic LinkedIn influencer way, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a smile that probably charmed clients and married men alike. But it was her Facebook that provided the real insights. Photos from company events where I could see David in the background, their body language betraying an intimacy that made my chest tighten. One photo from a Christmas party showed her hand resting on his arm, both of them laughing at some private joke while I'd been home alone preparing for another round of hormone injections. The caption read, "Amazing night with my work family." Work family. The phrase made me physically nauseous. I'd been excluded from David's work events for years because they were boring industry stuff. But apparently they were exciting enough when Brittany was involved. The smoking gun came at 11:47 p.m., buried in a Facebook post from 6 weeks ago that I almost missed. It was a simple photo of a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines captioned, "When life gives you surprises. Baby Walsh arriving in December." December. I calculated quickly. If she was announcing at what looked like 8 weeks based on the post date, she would have conceived in early January. My hands shook as I cross-referenced this with David's travel schedule and phone records. January 15th through 18th. David was supposedly in Seattle for a critical project kickoff. The same dates showed 17 phone calls between them, including one that lasted 3 hours. The pieces clicked together with devastating clarity. Brittany Walsh wasn't just David's affair partner. She was carrying his child. The baby I'd dreamed of for 15 years, the family we'd spent thousands of dollars and countless tears trying to create, had been handed to another woman as casually as a business card. I sat in my dark kitchen, staring at that ultrasound appointment for tomorrow, and realized I wasn't just meeting my husband's mistress. I was meeting the woman who'd gotten everything I'd ever wanted. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay in our king-size bed, staring at David's empty pillow and wondering how many lies it had absorbed over the past 8 months. The sheets smelled like his cologne, a scent that used to comfort me but now made me feel sick. I thought about the nursery we'd started planning in 2018, the one that became David's home office when we finally accepted that children weren't in our future. Had he thought about that room while making promises to Brittany about their baby? Had he felt even a moment of guilt? Or had I become so invisible to him that my pain didn't register anymore? The woman who'd spent her career bringing families together through medical imaging was about to come face to face with the family that had torn hers apart. But as the hours crawled by, my devastation slowly transformed into something sharper, more focused. I wasn't just Elena Martinez' heartbroken wife. I was Elena Martinez, medical professional with knowledge and skills that Brittany Walsh could never anticipate. Tomorrow's appointment wasn't just a routine ultrasound, it was reconnaissance. I was going to look into the eyes of the woman who'd stolen my life and study the child who should have been mine. By dawn, I'd made peace with what was coming, the first face-to-face meeting with my replacement. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly, Denver's weather matching my mood perfectly. I dressed with extra care, choosing my most professional outfit and applying makeup with the precision of war paint. In the mirror, I practiced the neutral expression I'd perfected over years of delivering difficult news to patients. Calm, competent, unreadable. Brittany Walsh would see nothing but medical professionalism from me today. No hint that I knew who she was or what she'd taken from me. I arrived at Presbyterian/St. Mary an hour early, reviewing the appointment schedule and making sure I'd be the technician assigned to room 3, where the 10:30 appointment would take place. Dr. Richardson barely looked up when I volunteered to take the scan, too busy with surgical schedules to question why his most senior tech was suddenly interested in routine prenatal work. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of avoiding ultrasounds because they reminded me of my own failures, I was about to perform one on the woman who'd made those failures even more painful. As 10:30 approached, I positioned myself at the front desk, pretending to organize files while watching the entrance. I wanted to see her walk in, wanted to study my replacement before she had any idea who I was. The hunter was ready for her prey. At exactly 10:28 a.m., she walked through the automatic doors of Presbyterian/St. Mary Hospital like she owned the place. Brittany Walsh was even more striking in person than in her carefully filtered social media photos. Tall, confident, with that particular glow that pregnant women seem to radiate. She wore a fitted maternity dress that showed off her 6-month bump with pride, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the Denver drizzle outside. I watched from behind the reception desk as she approached the check-in counter, her voice carrying that slight southern accent I'd heard in the background of David's phone calls. "Hi, I'm here for my ultrasound appointment. Brittany Walsh, 10:30. The receptionist smiled warmly and handed her the standard paperwork, completely unaware that she was processing the appointment that would change 3 lives forever. I forced myself to breathe normally to maintain the professional composure I'd spent years perfecting. In 2 minutes, I'd be face to face with the woman who'd been sleeping with my husband for 8 months, carrying the child I'd never been able to give him. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. Elena Martinez, the woman who'd helped thousands of families see their babies for the first time, was about to scan the baby that destroyed her own family. I gave her 15 minutes to complete the paperwork and get settled in room 3 before making my entrance. When I knocked and stepped inside, Brittany was already positioned on the examination table, her maternity dress hiked up to expose her rounded belly. She looked up with the bright, expectant smile that all my patients wore during their scans. Pure joy mixed with nervous excitement about seeing their baby. "Hi there. I'm so excited for this. It's my first pregnancy, and I still can't believe there's actually a little person in there." Her enthusiasm was genuine, infectious even, and for a split second I almost forgot why I was really there. Then I saw the diamond bracelet on her wrist, the same one David had claimed was a client appreciation gift he'd bought for his project manager in Seattle. The same bracelet I'd admired and secretly wished he'd thought to buy for me. My professional mask slipped for just a moment before I caught myself and smiled back. "Congratulations. I'm Elena, and I'll be doing your scan today. This is always such a special moment." Special indeed. I was about to get my first real look at my husband's secret life, and she had no idea she was about to be examined by the wife she'd unknowingly destroyed. As I prepared the ultrasound equipment, Brittany chatted nervously about her pregnancy journey, completely oblivious to the bomb she was dropping with every word. "The father is so excited about this baby. He's been traveling a lot for work lately, but he promises he'll be here for the birth in December. He's actually in Denver right now on business. What a coincidence, right?" She laughed, and the sound made my stomach clench. David was supposed to be in Seattle until Friday, but apparently his lies extended beyond just me. He's an engineer, works on these massive infrastructure projects. Very dedicated to his job. Sometimes too dedicated, you know? I nodded sympathetically while setting up the monitor, my hand steady despite the rage building in my chest. She had no idea she was describing my husband to his wife, painting him as the devoted father-to-be, while I sat at home believing his lies about late meetings and demanding clients. He's older than me, more mature, you know? He really knows what he wants in life. What he wanted, apparently, was a younger woman and the family he'd convinced me we couldn't have. The gel warmed in my hands as I prepared to begin the scan that would reveal more than Brittany Walsh could ever imagine. "Let's take a look at your baby," I said, applying the warm gel to her belly with practiced efficiency. The ultrasound wand glided across her skin, and within seconds the familiar grainy black and white images appeared on the monitor. There it was, a fully formed baby at 24 weeks, moving and stretching in the confined space of Brittany's womb. Despite everything, my professional instincts kicked in, and I found myself genuinely amazed by the perfect little human developing before our eyes. "Oh my God!" Brittany whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "Is that really my baby?" For a moment, I forgot about David, forgot about the betrayal, forgot about everything except the miracle happening on the screen. This was why I'd chosen this profession, these moments of pure wonder when parents see their children for the first time. But as I began taking measurements and documenting the baby's development, something didn't add up. The fetal measurements were showing a gestational age that didn't match Brittany's stated conception date. My trained eye caught the discrepancy immediately, and I rechecked the calculations twice to be sure. The baby was measuring at 24 weeks and 3 days, but according to Brittany's last menstrual period, she should only be 22 weeks along. A 2-week difference might seem minor to most people, but in my profession, timing is everything. I kept my expression neutral while my mind raced through the implications. If the baby was measuring 2 weeks ahead of Brittany's stated conception date, that meant she'd gotten pregnant in mid-December, not early January as her Facebook post suggested. I pulled up David's travel records on my phone, cross-referencing dates while pretending to adjust the ultrasound settings. December 15th through 18th. David was home in Denver for our anniversary weekend. I remembered that weekend clearly because it was one of the few times in months that he'd seemed present, engaged, almost like his old self. We'd gone to dinner at the Brown Palace, walked through the Botanic Gardens holiday lights display, even made love twice, something that had become increasingly rare. But apparently David had found time for someone else during that same period, because the baby on my screen had definitely been conceived while he was supposed to be celebrating 15 years of marriage with me. The timeline was undeniable, the measurements precise, the implications devastating. Brittany Walsh was carrying David's child, conceived during our anniversary weekend while I was foolishly believing we might be reconnecting. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd thought possible, but it also revealed something else. an opportunity for the kind of justice that only someone with my expertise could deliver. "Everything looks perfect," I told Brittany, printing out several images for her to take home. "Baby's measuring right on track, heartbeat is strong, all the organs look beautifully developed." She clutched the printouts like precious treasures, studying every grainy detail with the wonder of a first-time mother. "I can't wait to show these to the father. He's going to be so thrilled." The innocence in her voice was almost heartbreaking. She genuinely believed she was building a future with a man who was already married, already committed to someone else. But as I watched her gather her things and prepare to leave, I realized something that changed everything. Brittany Walsh wasn't just the other woman, she was another victim. David had lied to her just as thoroughly as he'd lied to me, probably told her he was single or divorced, fed her the same carefully crafted stories he'd perfected over 8 months of deception. The real villain in this story wasn't the young woman who'd fallen for a charming older man's lies. It was the man who'd made those lies so convincing that 2 intelligent women had believed them completely. But knowledge, I was learning, was power, and I now had information that could destroy David's carefully constructed house of cards. The question was, what was I going to do with it? As Brittany left room 3 with her ultrasound photos and dreams of happy endings, I sat alone with the equipment, staring at the blank monitor and processing what I just discovered. The baby was David's. There was no question about that based on the timing and Brittany's obvious belief in their relationship. But the conception date revealed something crucial. David had been with both of us during the same time period, living parallel lives with surgical precision. While I'd been hoping our anniversary weekend meant we were rebuilding our connection, he'd been creating a new life with someone else. The cruelty of it was breathtaking, but it also gave me something I hadn't had before: leverage. David thought he was controlling the narrative, managing 2 separate relationships without either woman knowing about the other. But now I had medical evidence, documented proof of his timeline, and most importantly, I had access to information that Brittany didn't. For the first time since finding that text message, I felt something other than devastation. I felt powerful. David Martinez had made one crucial mistake in his elaborate deception. He'd underestimated the woman he'd been lying to for 8 months. The woman who spent her days uncovering hidden truths in grainy ultrasound images was about to turn those same investigative skills on her own life. And unlike the routine scans I performed daily, this examination was going to reveal secrets that would change everything. The weekend after Brittany's ultrasound passed in a surreal haze of forced normalcy and careful planning. David returned from his Seattle business trip Friday evening with the usual gifts: expensive chocolates from Pike Place Market, and a coffee table book about Boeing's history that I knew he'd grabbed at the airport. He kissed my cheek with the same mechanical affection he'd shown for months, completely unaware that I now knew exactly where he'd really been and with whom. "How was your week, honey? Anything exciting happen at the hospital?" The question was casual, routine, but it took every ounce of my professional composure not to laugh at the irony. "Yes, David. Something incredibly exciting happened. I met your pregnant girlfriend and discovered that you're an even better liar than I gave you credit for." Instead, I smiled and told him about a complicated twin pregnancy I'd helped diagnose, watching his face for any sign of guilt or recognition. There was nothing. After 15 years of marriage, David had become a stranger wearing my husband's face, and I was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. That night, as he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and began formulating a plan that would give him exactly what he deserved. Saturday morning brought an unexpected gift wrapped in the form of David's carelessness. While he showered, his phone buzzed with a text from B that he'd forgotten to put on silent. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked up his phone and read the message that would provide the final piece of my puzzle. "Baby kicked so hard during the ultrasound yesterday. The text said everything looks perfect. Can't wait to start our family together. Love you." My hands trembled as I scrolled up through their recent conversation, finding weeks of intimate messages that painted a picture of a man deeply in love with someone who wasn't his wife. David had been telling Brittany that he was finalizing his divorce, that they'd be together officially once his complicated financial situation was resolved. He'd even been looking at houses in Seattle, planning a future that included her and their baby while telling me his increased travel was temporary. The depth of his deception was staggering, but it also revealed something crucial. Brittany had no idea he was still married and living with me. She thought she was in a committed relationship with a man who was choosing her and their child above all else. The poor girl was as much a victim of David's lies as I was, which meant she deserved to know the truth just as much as I did. By Sunday evening, I'd made a decision that would have shocked the Elena Martinez of a week ago. I was going to destroy David's carefully constructed lies with the same precision he'd used to build them. But this wouldn't be an emotional confrontation or a tearful scene. This would be strategic, calculated, and absolutely devastating. I started by documenting everything. Screenshots of phone records, printed copies of text messages, medical records from Brittany's ultrasound that proved the conception timeline, even photos of David's travel receipts that contradicted his claimed whereabouts. I opened a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown and stored copies of everything, along with a detailed timeline of his deception. If David wanted to play games with people's lives, he was about to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. I also did something I'd never imagined I'd need to do. I consulted with Patricia Hendricks, the best divorce attorney in Denver, and began the process of protecting my assets before David realized his world was about to implode. Patricia was impressed by my documentation and warned me that Colorado's no-fault divorce laws meant his infidelity wouldn't impact asset division, but it would certainly help in court if he tried to claim I was an unfit spouse or hide money. The hardest part of my plan wasn't gathering evidence or consulting lawyers. It was deciding how to handle Brittany Walsh. She was innocent in all this, a young woman who'd fallen for a master manipulator's lies and was now carrying his child while believing in a future that would never exist. I could have simply exposed David to her and walked away, but that felt cruel and incomplete. Brittany deserved better than a text message or anonymous tip. She deserved the truth delivered with compassion by someone who understood exactly how convincing David's lies could be. After 3 sleepless nights, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to tell her everything in person, woman to woman, with all the evidence she'd need to make informed decisions about her future. It wouldn't be easy, and it would certainly be awkward, but it was the right thing to do. We were both victims of the same man's selfishness, and we both deserved the chance to reclaim our lives from his web of deception. I scheduled a meeting with her under the pretense of following up on her ultrasound results, knowing that my medical credentials would get her to listen long enough for me to explain who I really was. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in my car outside Starbucks on 16th Street Mall, waiting for Brittany Walsh to arrive for what she thought was a routine medical consultation. I had chosen a public place to make her feel safe, but private enough for the conversation we needed to have. My hands were steady, steadier than they'd been in weeks, because I finally had a purpose beyond just surviving David's betrayal. I was about to give 2 women the truth they deserved, even if it destroyed the life I'd known for 15 years. At exactly 3 p.m., Brittany walked through the door, looking radiant in her maternity clothes and completely unprepared for what was coming. She spotted me immediately and waved, her smile bright and trusting. "Elena, thank you so much for meeting me. I was a little confused by your call, but I appreciate you taking the time." I gestured for her to sit down, my heart pounding as I prepared to detonate the bomb that would destroy both our worlds and hopefully rebuild them into something honest. "Brittany, there's something I need to tell you about the father of your baby. Something that's going to be very difficult to hear, but something you absolutely need to know." Her smile faltered slightly, confusion replacing the easy confidence she'd walked in with. The moment of truth had arrived. I started with the simplest, most devastating fact. The man you're in love with, the father of your baby, his name is David Martinez, and he's my husband of 15 years. The color drained from Brittany's face so quickly I was afraid she might faint. "That's impossible," she whispered, her hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. "David told me he was divorced, that his ex-wife was bitter about the settlement. he said. Her voice trailed off as the implications hit her, and I watched a young woman's world crumble in real time. I reached across the table and gently touched her hand, the same way I'd comfort patients receiving difficult diagnoses. I know this is shocking and I know it hurts, but I have proof and I think you deserve to see it. Over the next hour, I showed her everything. The phone records proving David lived with me, photos from our anniversary dinner the weekend their baby was conceived, even our joint tax returns from last year. With each piece of evidence, Brittany's shock transformed into anger, then grief, then a cold fury that I recognized because I'd felt it myself. He's been lying to both of us, I explained gently. You're not the other woman, Brittany. You're another victim. And your baby deserves better than a father who builds his life on lies. By the time we parted ways, we'd formed an unlikely alliance. Two women who'd been deceived by the same man, united in our determination to make sure he faced the consequences of his choices. That evening, I sat in my home office, the room that should have been our nursery, and finalized the plan that would end my marriage and begin my new life. Tomorrow, I would confront David with everything I knew, but not in the emotional, tearful scene he might expect. This would be a business meeting, complete with documentation, legal representation, and a clear timeline for his departure from my life. I'd already changed the locks, legally since the house was in my name, transferred our joint accounts to individual ones, and filed the preliminary divorce papers that Patricia had prepared. David Martinez thought he was smart enough to manage two relationships without consequences, but he'd made one fatal error. He'd underestimated the woman he'd been lying to for 8 months. The Elena Martinez who'd trusted blindly was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and absolutely committed to justice. As I sealed the envelope containing his divorce papers and the evidence of his deception, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation that ended my old life, but tonight, for the first time in weeks, I was going to sleep soundly. The hunter had become the predator, and David Martinez was about to discover that some prey fights back. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crystal-clear Colorado sunshine that makes Denver feel like the top of the world. I woke up before dawn, not from anxiety or insomnia, but from the quiet confidence that comes with having a plan and the power to execute it. David was still asleep beside me, completely unaware that this would be the last morning he'd wake up in our bed, in our house, in the life he'd taken for granted while building another one in secret. I made coffee with the same routine I'd followed for 15 years, but everything felt different now. Lighter, somehow, as if I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. At 7:30 a.m., David stumbled into the kitchen in his bathrobe, checking his phone for messages from Brittany while I pretended to read the Denver Post. Morning, honey. I've got that early meeting with the airport authority today. Might run late. Another lie, delivered with the casual ease of someone who'd perfected deception as an art form. I smiled and nodded, knowing that his meeting was actually a romantic lunch with his pregnant girlfriend, and that by evening, both women in his life would know exactly who David Martinez really was. Have a good day, sweetheart, I said, kissing his cheek one last time. I think today is going to be very revealing. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in Patricia Hendrick's law office, reviewing the final details of what she'd dubbed Operation Scorched Earth, a comprehensive legal strategy designed to protect my assets and ensure David's deception was documented for posterity. Patricia, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd built her reputation destroying cheating spouses, was almost gleeful about the evidence I'd gathered. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen documentation this thorough, she said, flipping through the timeline I'd created. Your husband won't be able to lie his way out of this one. We'd structured everything carefully. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences to avoid lengthy court battles, but included detailed evidence of his financial deception and emotional abuse. The house, which was solely in my name thanks to an inheritance from my grandmother, would remain mine. His 401k and pension would be split according to Colorado law, but his recent business expenses, which I'd proven were actually romantic getaways with Brittany, would be deducted from his share. He's going to walk away with exactly what he deserves, Patricia said with satisfaction, which is significantly less than he thinks. At noon, I signed the papers that would legally end my marriage, feeling nothing but relief as I wrote my name for the final time as Mrs. David Martinez. The confrontation I'd planned for months finally arrived at 6:30 p.m. when David walked through our front door expecting dinner and finding me sitting at our dining room table with a stack of documents and a bottle of wine I'd opened for myself. "Elena, what's all this?" His voice carried that particular tone men use when they know they're in trouble, but aren't sure how much their wives have figured out. I gestured to the chair across from me, my voice calm and steady. "Sit down, David. We need to talk about Brittany Walsh and your baby." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might collapse, but he managed to stumble into the chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his eyes were already scanning the documents spread across the table, recognizing phone records and ultrasound images that destroyed any hope of denial. "Let me help you understand," I said, sliding a photo across the table, the ultrasound image of his child, with my signature clearly visible in the corner. "This is your baby, David. 24 weeks and 3 days gestational age. Conceived during our anniversary weekend while you were supposedly committed to saving our marriage. Brittany Walsh, administrative assistant at your firm, currently 6 months pregnant with your child. Ring any bells?" The next hour was a masterclass in watching a master manipulator realize he'd been outmaneuvered by someone he'd underestimated for 15 years. David tried every tactic in his arsenal. Denial, you're imagining things. Gaslighting, you're being paranoid and jealous. Bargaining, it was a mistake, we can work through this. And finally, when faced with irrefutable evidence, anger, you had no right to invade my privacy. But I'd spent months preparing for each of these responses, and I met them all with the same professional calm I used when delivering difficult diagnoses to patients. "Your privacy?" I laughed, a sound that surprised us both with its genuine amusement. "David, you lost the right to privacy when you started using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms with your girlfriend. You lost it when you lied about business trips while planning a future with another woman. And you definitely lost it when you got her pregnant during our anniversary weekend." I slid the divorce papers across the table, watching his face crumble as he realized the extent of my preparation. "These are divorce papers, already filed with the court. You have 30 days to vacate this house, which, as you'll remember, belongs to me. Your belongings are packed and waiting in the garage." The man who'd controlled every aspect of our relationship for months was finally experiencing what it felt like to be powerless. But the real revelation came when I told him about my conversation with Brittany Walsh. "She knows, David. I told her everything about our marriage, about your lies, about the fact that you've been promising her a future while living with your wife." His face went white as he processed the implications. "You destroyed her life too, you know. That poor girl thought she was building a family with a man who chose her, when really she was just another victim of your selfishness." I watched him realize that his carefully constructed double life had collapsed completely, that both women he'd been manipulating now knew the truth about each other. "Brittany is a smart woman, and she's going to make the right decisions for herself and her baby. But those decisions won't include you, because she finally sees you for what you really are." The power dynamic in our relationship had shifted so completely that David looked like a stranger, smaller, weaker, pathetic in a way I'd never seen before. 15 years, Elena, he whispered, as if our marriage length somehow excused his betrayal. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I looked at this man I'd loved, this person who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my hopes for a family, and felt nothing but pity. "It meant everything to me, David. That's why your betrayal cuts so deep. But it obviously meant nothing to you, or you wouldn't have thrown it away for someone young enough to be your daughter." The final act of our marriage played out with surprising efficiency. David packed his remaining belongings while I watched from the kitchen, sipping wine and feeling lighter with each box he carried to his car. He tried one last manipulation, standing in our doorway with tears in his eyes, begging for another chance to make things right. But I'd seen too much, learned too much, grown too much to fall for his performance. The only thing you can do to make this right is to be honest with Brittany about what kind of man you are and let her decide if she wants you in her child's life, I told him. And David, if you ever contact me again for anything other than divorce proceedings, I'll make sure everyone at your firm knows exactly why your marriage ended. He left without another word, and I locked the door behind him, officially ending the chapter of my life that had been written in lies. That night, I slept alone in my bed for the first time in 15 years, and instead of feeling lonely or afraid, I felt free. The woman who'd spent months being deceived and manipulated was gone, replaced by someone stronger, smarter, and absolutely committed to living her truth. 6 months later, I'm writing the story for my new apartment in Cherry Creek, a bright, modern space that belongs entirely to me. The divorce was finalized in February, and David got exactly what Patricia had promised, significantly less than he'd expected. Brittany Walsh gave birth to a healthy baby girl in December and decided to raise her as a single mother after David's true character became clear during their brief attempt at co-parenting. She sends me photos occasionally. We've become unlikely friends, bonded by our shared experience of surviving David's deception. I've started dating again, carefully and on my own terms, and I've discovered that life after betrayal can be richer and more authentic than anything I experienced during my marriage. The woman who thought her greatest failure was not being able to have children has realized that her greatest strength was surviving the loss of everything she thought she wanted and building something better from the ruins. At 43, I'm finally living the life I was meant to have, honest, independent, and absolutely my own. David Martinez taught me that some people are capable of extraordinary cruelty, but he also taught me that I'm capable of extraordinary strength. For that lesson, despite everything, I'm almost grateful.